Namaskar and thank you for joining us here on our weekly program on geoeconomics. We'll be discussing the vision of India as a $30 trillion economy by the year 2047. It would be 100 years of India's independence, and currently India has reached what could be considered as the golden age of economic progress in a sense, since the country is well poised for rapid growth with a youthful population, adequate resources, adequate momentum as well, and a vision. Now, the Niti Aayog has been working on a vision document. It has 10 themes: rural and agriculture, infrastructure, resources, social vision, welfare, finance and economy, commerce and industry, technology, governance. And to deconstruct this vision, we have with us two guests. Let me introduce you to them. Professor N.R. Bhanumurthy is a senior economist and Vice Chancellor of the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar School of Economics, University, Bengaluru, and Srirangam is an economist and expert on the Indian economy. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. Dr. Bhanumurthy, how timely is a vision document, of this nature with about a 24-year horizon?
Yeah, I think it is much awaited document from the Niti Aayog. Since the Niti Aayog has been incepted, we have been looking forward for that kind of vision document, and we are glad that we are very close to have those kind of vision document right now, which is an important aspect for the long-term growth and sustainability of this Indian economy. Especially in the absence of planning commission, I think we were looking for some long-term vision document. To that extent, we are actually cleanly looking forward for looking at this document, and I'm sure the Niti Aayog would do a fantastic job in bringing out a document which will really include the aspirations of this Indian youth, you rightly pointed out, and also to make that India be one of the top countries in the world, especially when you look at developmental indicators. So to that extent, we are all very keenly looking forward for the report.
Mr. Srirangam, do you think this vision document, when it comes out, will act as a blueprint where institutions of government, would need to work to implement it, or will it just be, guiding principles in a sense?
See, earlier also when you had the planning commission and the 5-year planning process, you used to have a perspective plan running for 15 years. That got broken into 5-year plans, and which further got broken into annual plans. So it's another 15-year type of a perspective plan, with the difference that it stretches for another, say this is 23 till 47, 25 years. And we require it at this point because everything is coming our way. Internally and externally, there could be a bit of a challenge, but internally, policy-wise, resource-wise, India is in a takeoff stage on a secular basis, on a long-term basis. And therefore, yes, it is a vision, it's a perspective, and you need to have policies coming together, and you need to have a certain other institutional governance and other reforms coming together to make this into a reality. That is the biggest challenge.
Okay, Dr. Bhanumurthy, is India a candidate to fall into the middle income trap? Do you think that this document, when it's ready, is going to adequately prepare us for that kind of a challenge? Because after all, we do have a huge population.
I think already the CEO of Niti Aayog very clearly mentioned there's a whole effort has been made to really see that India not get into the middle income trap. And I don't think, given the current context, as Mr. Srirangam pointed out, I think India is poised to become one of the top countries. And for that, I think the vision document certainly will help. But at the same time, it should not become like an Excel sheet kind of a exercise. And I think what is important is that this vision document and the target that we fix for the 2047 should lead to bringing out some policy prescription. And I think that is something that we need to really work on. Anybody can really give some targets for 2047. In fact, why 2047? Even for 2030 also one can give same target. But how to achieve this? What are the policy ingredients that is required, and what are the institutional mechanism that is required? And I think that needs to be part of the vision document. Okay. And I certainly don't see that we'll get into the middle income trap, because there are a lot of literature say that how to avoid middle income trap kind of a situation.
So institutional change, reform, all these should be part of the document. But Mr. Srirangam, the pace of change and redundancy seems to be very fast. We're in the digital age. People are changing their technology, their gadgets really fast. So that's probably a sign also. Does this put pressure on India's skill sets, resources, innovation? Do you see Make in India digital products and services actually leading growth?
See, that's our advantage, actually. If you look into our, the advantages, we have this, we've been the leader in the software. It's not the products that we have created, but we were on the verge of creating products as well. Our exports and also domestic consumption for software. So the technical education and human capital has been our advantage. It's just that we need to put a little more energy into the emerging technologies like generative AI and the associated, 4.0, industrial revolution, nano, etc. If we can get our story right on research and development and human capital, I don't think it'll be tough for us to get to the $30 trillion, 100 years of our independence. That's where the entire challenge lies. Putting our energies into the cutting edge technologies, the nanos and the generative AIs and so on and so forth, linking it with our academia, the higher education. That is a real challenge. Hopefully, the new bill passed about research foundation and also the new education policy, they'll take care of it. And also in the union budget of the current fiscal, there is this Pradhan Mantri Vikas Kaushal Yojana 4.0. That is specifically to skill people in the Industrial Revolution 4.0. And that gives a lot of hope that we are on the right track.
Dr. Bhanumurthy, if we look at what some of the reports suggest, it says that exports are going to be at around $8.7 trillion at that time. Imports are going to be about $12.12 trillion at that time. Do you see Indian products, Indian multinationals spreading far and wide, across the world, across continents? And what's really going to be the mechanism for them to get there?
No, again, I get back to my previous point. These are all Excel-based estimation. And I think we need to understand how do we reach that $12 trillion from 400 billion right now. And I think that's going to be the huge catch-up for India to reach that from 450 to $12 trillion. Yes. So I think that is what I need to look for. I mean, as I said, these numbers can be floated by anybody, but I think what is required is the concrete policies. Are we there? Particularly when it comes to trade, I think if you look at, this is one disappointment for me for the past couple of years. And I think the way we are doing the policies in the last couple of years, I think is slightly regressive when it comes to trade. I'm sure you would have heard the same thing from people like Dr. Arvind Pangaria also. So I think that part of the story is still, I think we are still not clear how we can reach that 12 number that you just now told me. So if you can do that, I think we'll be able to achieve whatever 30 trillion that we're talking about. But I think it's going to be extremely challenging. And I think that's where we need to set our house right. And as I think as Mr. Srirangam pointed out, one big challenge in this whole 2047 is that right now we see that the technology or the innovation, which is generally disruptive, and the youth bulge are, I think it can become a trade-off between these two things. But I think we need to have policies where we can see a complementarity between the youth bulge and the innovations that we are seeing right now. Innovations are growing much, much faster. I completely agree with the speaker when he said about, we are innovating much faster in the current age. So I think complementing these two things is going to be a huge challenge. And again, let us not get into these numbers, but let us get into the policy prescriptions and policy suggestions, how we reach there. I think that's more.
Mr. Srirangam, this vision is more than just talking about massive growth in GDP. it's also a process of nation building. To what extent does it require social change to be driving this economic change?
Linking directly to economic growth, women should participate in the labor process. The labor force participation rate of women is very low, and it could be falling also. And for structural reasons, historic reasons, social reasons, we need to remove that, alleviate that. Secondly, on the social front, we need to get our act together on the education, on the health. We are still not spending 6% of GDP on public education. We are still not spending 3% of GDP on health. And that's very critical for the foundation of the growth process. And further up, if you scale, you have to take care of the malnutrition problem of the children. You need to ensure that the quality of jobs is decent. It's good, the headline number that the unemployment rate is falling is heartening. But what's the quality of the jobs? And that has huge impact on the social fabric. So these are the areas on the social front we need to take care of. They are intimately connected to governance reforms as well. I'm sure we'll get into that a little later.
Okay. Dr. Bhanumurthy, more than 20,000 people have been consulted, including industry captains, Mukesh Ambani, Gautam Adani, Nandan Nilekani, N. Chandrasekaran. What do you think about the intent and purpose of this kind of planning exercise with a wide consultation?
I want to relate this to your previous question.
Sure.
Now, if you want to make this vision document inclusive, I think it's good to have a consultation with all the people that you just said, but I think we also need to have some feel for the bottom, right? I think the bottom approach is much more important, and I know the Niti Aayog is actually trying to look at how we can bring this whole that 2047 vision from the states. I think states should not be neglected, and not just the states. I think if you look at the rural segment should not be neglected, and I think some ideas need to be brought in from the rural segment as well. So in that sense, the story will not be complete by just by saying we have consulted 20,000 think tanks. But I think, and I'm sure Ministry of Rural Development has much more, information about the rural areas, and I think we need to really bring those ideas from the bottom. But at the same time, I just wanted to add to what Mr. Srirangam pointed out. Again, I'm not worried about the 6%, 7%, 10%, but I think how we spend on improving the health and education. And I think that is, in fact, that whole efficiency issues need to be brought in. And I agree with the previous speaker, where we need to bring in the governance. In fact, there are some of the countries in the world who spend 15%, 20%. Then you have seen how they completely failed during the COVID-19. I think it's what is important is the efficiency of public expenditure. I think that is the focus. I think that should be the focus. We have come to this stage right now. We need to demand the returns from the public sector outlay. I think that should be the focus right now.
So government is playing a big role in this. Mr. Srirangam, government think tanks working along with private sector ones. In fact, Boston Consulting Group is going to be assisting in drafting this document. But how seriously do government institutions take private sector advice? We know that many, reports are presented and they just put on the shelves, gather dust.
But remember, since the launch of these reforms in 91, we had this term called indicative planning, where the government looking to the private sector to put in more money than the government itself. That necessitates that they sit together and plan it out. So consultative indicative planning requires that the private sector and the public sector work together. After all, aren't we depending upon the PPPs, public-private partnerships in every sector, social sector, physical sector, technological sector, educational sector, etc.? So why won't we take seriously the reports of BCG, Pricewaterhouse, all these people, McKinsey? We have to take them very seriously. After all, they have some value to add to the governance. State capacity can be improved only when we consult the private sector and how to go about it. After all, as Bhanumurthy was saying, It's not how much you spend, it is how you spend, the quality of expenditure. That depends upon governance reforms and state capacity, to which these globally renowned groups like BCG have something to contribute, and we have to take them as seriously as the government itself. After all, they're involved. We depend on them for the success of the $13 trillion project.
Okay, Dr. Bhanumurthy, so then, yeah, come ahead. You wanted to come in on that point, or
Yeah. No,
okay.
I see. I think I don't think we should really look at private versus private public sector. I think we need to work together on this whole, even the sustainable development goals. I think we are supposed to have private sector's participation in a very big way. But I think the catch here is sometimes we miss our own estimates, and it's already there. I'll just give one example. RBI is doing India CLEMS project. Okay, the India CLEMS project, which I think they update every year, and it very clearly mentioned it is part of the World CLEMS project, which is the productivity estimate, and it shows that India's growth of productivity in the last couple of years is growth rate I'm talking about is much more than the growth rate of productivity in the Chinese economy. But I just wanted to ask how many people have seen this particular number. I don't see this coming into the public discourse, whether it is a private sector reports or public sector report. I mean, you just Google it, India CLEMS. I don't think you will get it from any of this report that you are talking about. So my point is, we already have so much of literature, and I think we need to identify the right literature. That's where China has grown much faster than many countries for 30 years. So we need to look at how they grew. And that's where the productivity growth becomes very, very important. And that's where the quality of expenditure on health and education becomes extremely important.
So, Mr. Srirangam, is there a model that India should follow then? You know, the China model or the US model or Europe's model or Japan or South Korea? Also, you know, what's important is trying to align that vision with the Sustainable Development Goals, as Dr. Bhanumurthy was saying, and whatever goals are made after 2030.
So, do we have to imitate somebody? We should not.
Okay.
See, we are a unique country. Our demography is unique, history is unique, civilization is unique. Our economic model has been unique. Jawaharlal Nehru and others, the Mahalanobis model, enormous success of it. Our reforms, you know, since 91, and the current model that we are following, welfareism, new welfareism, and our emphasis on sanitation, inclusion, and digital public infrastructure. This is adding up to be a new model that others should follow if it suits them. We should not follow anyone. For that matter, historically, from agriculture to manufacturing to services. What is Ijaz Ghani saying? What is Raghuram Rajan saying? They are saying that services should be the basis for our future economic growth. So if you follow historically any other country, you will strive to make manufacturing the center of your economy, for which we are not suited. We don't have the land. We don't have the land for manufacturing. You know, the population is 17% and the land is 2.5% of the world. So we need to carve out our own models. For example, we need to have the services-led growth model. And we have this opportunity again knocking on our door. Generative AI, the cutting-edge technology, that is where our talent should take us, and we should regain our status as a world leaders that we once had historically. So we should develop our own model. We've been developing our own model. We should sustain that, and we should fine-tune that. That is where our future lies. You start imitating, then future looks a bit shaky.
No, I mean, imitating is not imitation in that sense. We have to take the best practices. But Dr. Bhanumurthy, India's population could be an issue, isn't it? Since it brings down the per capita income. And you have to measure, if you say developing country, the developed country, it has to be at a certain level. I think $12,000 is what World Bank says, but others are saying much higher. In fact, $20,000 per capita. What do you think? I mean, how seriously should this issue of population control be taken going forward?
No, when you just start saying that population is a problem, then we are actually coming out of the whole vision document. I think we need to say that our population is our strength. And this is exactly where I said, I think we need to look at the productivity. And this is where we need to compare. I'm not saying that we need to compare the models, but at least we need to see what level of productivity will lead to what level of growth or what level of per capita GDP. I think for that extent, we need to look at how productivity can be improved. And again, ultimately, I think it is the governance. And for one, I always taken a position that there is no dearth of public finances. But only thing is, we just don't know how to spend it. And I think that's where, in fact, if you look at the states, I mean, you will be surprised that how they spend the resources that they have. And I think this is where I think we need to really focus. But when it comes to increasing the per capita GDP, one aspect again I am hoping that vision document will also look at is the structural transformation. The structural transformation is something, as we rightly pointed out, we have come from agriculture to services because it clearly comes out of the comparative advantage theory, where India had a much better advantage when it comes to services, and it has complemented the world growth, where world growth was actually coming from the manufacturing sector. Now, if you want to really go from here, I think we need to have a stable, growth between the sectors. And at the same time, we all know that manufacturing is the one which attracts more employment. So the employment intensity in manufacturing is higher than the service sector. I don't think we have any shortcut to become advanced country if we cannot increase the share of the manufacturing sector, because that's what I said, the population should become an asset for us, and for that we need to really increase the share of the manufacturing sector.
Sure. Mr. Srirangam, it is the global south, the middle income countries that make the difference. They are the ones who are growing up, and hence they are engines. To what extent, is South-South cooperation, India becoming the voice of the global south, all this helping us to develop new markets, probably unique products as well, based like UPI, for instance. I mean, these things that can all start, a new revolution in a sense.
For the last about 2-3 decades, South-South cooperation has been registering spectacular progress. India is a leading country in that. China also calls itself South. That's another debate altogether. But Africa is the youngest continent, and they have tremendous future. And India, a leader in education, health, and telecommunications, so on, we could link up with them for mutual symbiotic growth. And in the G20, we have seen that India has displayed its leadership of Global South. We have inducted the African Union into the G20, and that is going to be a stimulus for South-South cooperation, be it in technology and health, education, sustainable agricultural development. In all these areas, South-South is where the future is going to be, because the West is declining. Germany is in recession.
Yes.
And you know about Japan. And so it is South where you have the markets, you have the consumption, you have the innovation, and that's where the leadership should also come. That's what the reforms in the UN are about, IMF reforms are about, World Bank reforms. The Larry Summers and Kissing task force about multilateral development banks and the reforms.
Sure.
Why the reforms? Because you need to situate the global South in its rightful place.
Fair enough.
And of course, India is a rightful leader.
Indeed. Final word from you, Dr. Bhanumurthy. I mean, if we look at, we are all measuring this in terms of the US dollar, but how stable is the US dollar going forward? People are talking about, alternative currencies and things like that. What is is the value of the US dollar? If it falls, for instance, I mean, we'd probably reach there faster.
Well, I think, again, it's an Excel-based calculation, I just told you. I mean, we just don't know where the US economy is going. But I think, whatever calculation that you do, whatever currency that you use, I think India is certainly in a place where I think it's on a takeoff stage. And I don't think these currency issues will actually have any constraints on India becoming global economy. And I just wanted to add one small point to the previous question. And if you look at for the past 10-15 years, if at all one country has given many global public goods, I think it is India. So to that extent, right? We don't need to claim that we are the big leader in global south. We have done it, we have shown it, and it is experienced by all other global south countries. So let us, I think, work together to make India as one of the leading countries in the world.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Professor N.R. Bhanumurthy, Senior Economist, Vice Chancellor of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar School of Economics, University, Bengaluru, and Mr. Sriram Srirangam, economist and expert on the Indian economy. Thank you very much for joining us. In conclusion, let's say this, by 2047, India's literacy levels also are going to be very much higher, close to 90%. Also, India's life expectancy is expected to rise due to better healthcare. But India is one of the growth engines of the world currently. And South-South cooperation, as we've been talking, is increasing the number of developing countries moving up from LDCs. Middle-income countries are the home to 75% of the world's population, also about 62% of the world's poor. And these are the markets and economies that need to be developed with the India effect. Thanks very much for watching. Namaskar.